The evening air was soft and golden as Margaret walked through Riverside Park, her worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder. At 62, she had learned to find peace in these quiet moments. After the children she cared for had gone home, when the world seemed to slow down just enough for her to breathe. Margaret had been a nanny for over 20 years. Not by choice initially. Life had taken unexpected turns after her divorce, and caring for other people's children had become both her profession and her calling. She didn't have much. A small apartment, a 15-year-old Honda, and a heart that somehow never ran out of room for one more worried child. As she rounded the bend near the old oak trees, she heard it. Soft whimpering like a kitten lost in the rain. There, on a wooden bench beneath the string lights that the city had recently installed, sat a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. With golden hair that caught the lamplight and a pink dress that seemed too fancy for a playground. The child clutched a small white stuffed rabbit to her chest, her tiny shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Margaret's heart did what it always did when she saw a child in distress. It simply opened. "Hello there, sweetheart," Margaret said gently, her voice carrying the warmth of countless bedtime stories. She approached slowly, the way she had learned to do with frightened little ones. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up with eyes blue as summer sky, filled with tears that made Margaret's chest tighten. "I can't find my daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "He was here, and then he wasn't." Margaret sat down on the bench, leaving comfortable space between them. She had learned over the years that sometimes the greatest gift you could give a scared child was simply your presence. Steady and unhurried. "I'm Margaret," she said softly. "And this is a very lovely rabbit you have there. Does he have a name?" The little girl sniffled, looking down at her treasured companion. "Mr. Whiskers. Daddy gave him to me when Mommy went to heaven." The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for too long. Margaret felt that familiar ache, the one that came when life revealed its tender wounds. "Mr. Whiskers looks like a very good friend," she said. "And what's your name, honey?" "Emma," the girl replied, wiping her nose with the back of her small hand. "Emma Claire Patterson." "That's a beautiful name," Margaret said, reaching into her bag. She always carried tissues, Band-Aids, and a small package of crackers, the essential supplies of someone who made her living caring for children. "Here, let me help you with those tears." As Margaret gently dabbed Emma's face, she noticed the quality of the child's clothes. The hand-smocked dress, the small patent leather shoes that probably cost more than Margaret spent on groceries in a month. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that this little girl was scared and alone. "Tell me about your daddy," Margaret said, settling back on the bench. "What does he look like?" Emma's face brightened slightly. "He's really tall and he wears suits like princes in movies. He has brown hair and he always smells like the soap in his office." She paused, her lower lip trembling again. "But he works so much, and sometimes I think he forgets about me." Margaret's heart squeezed. She had seen this before. Successful parents so caught up in providing that they sometimes forgot the simple act of being present. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm sure he could never forget about you. Sometimes grown-ups just get confused about what's really important." They sat together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the string lights twinkle like earthbound stars. Margaret found herself thinking about her own life. The children she had raised who weren't her own, the love she had given freely even when her own heart felt empty. "Are you somebody's grandma?" Emma asked suddenly, leaning slightly closer. Margaret smiled, though it carried a hint of old sadness. "No, honey. I take care of children, but I don't have any grandchildren of my own." She had made peace with this truth long ago, but it still visited her in quiet moments. "That's sad," Emma said with the honest sympathy that only children possess. "But you're very nice, like what I think a grandma should be." Before Margaret could respond, she heard rapid footsteps on the park path. A tall man in an expensive navy suit was approaching, his face a mixture of panic and relief. Even in the dim light, she could see the family resemblance. The same blonde hair, the same bright eyes. "Emma," he called out, his voice breaking slightly. "Oh, thank God!" The little girl jumped up and ran to him, Mr. Whiskers clutched tightly in her arms. "Daddy, I was so scared." "I looked everywhere for you." The man swept her up in his arms, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. Margaret could see tears in his eyes as he buried his face in his daughter's hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. I got that phone call and I stepped away for just a minute. I thought you were right behind me." Margaret rose from the bench, preparing to quietly slip away. This was their moment, and she had simply been the bridge to bring them back together. But Emma noticed. "Wait!" the little girl called out, reaching over her father's shoulder. "Daddy, this is Margaret. She took care of me, and she's really nice, and she doesn't have any grandchildren, and I think that's very sad." The man turned toward Margaret, and she saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine gratitude, not the polite dismissal she sometimes received from wealthy parents who viewed her as part of the service industry. "I can't thank you enough," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Patterson. You probably saved my life tonight. I don't know what I would have done if something had happened to her." Margaret shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the sincerity in his eyes. "She's a wonderful little girl, Mr. Patterson. You should be very proud." "I am," he said, looking at Emma with such love that it made Margaret's heart warm. "Though I'm realizing I may not always show it the right way." Emma wiggled in her father's arms until he set her down. She immediately went to Margaret and wrapped her small arms around the older woman's waist. "Thank you for keeping me safe," she whispered. "Mr. Whiskers likes you too." Margaret knelt down to Emma's level, her eyes misting slightly. "You take good care of Mr. Whiskers," she said softly. "And remember, your daddy loves you very much. Sometimes adults get busy, but that doesn't mean we don't care." David watched this exchange with growing awareness. Here was his daughter, finding comfort with a stranger because he had been too distracted by a business call to notice her slip away. The weight of that realization settled on him like a heavy coat. "Margaret," he said quietly, Would you allow me to buy you dinner? It's the least I can do, and honestly, I'd like Emma to spend more time with someone who clearly understands children." Margaret started to decline. She was used to boundaries, to keeping her place, but something in Emma's hopeful expression made her pause. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Patterson, but it's really not necessary." "Please," Emma said, taking Margaret's hand. "Daddy and I eat dinner by ourselves every night, and sometimes he just looks at his phone. It would be more fun with you there?" David flushed slightly, recognizing the truth in his daughter's words. "Please," he said simply. "It would mean a great deal to both of us." And so it was that Margaret found herself in an upscale restaurant an hour later. Watching Emma carefully cut her chicken fingers while chattering about school and Mr. Whiskers and the book she was reading, David, she noticed, had put his phone away entirely. Something Emma mentioned with obvious delight. "You know," David said during a quiet moment, "Emma hasn't talked this much at dinner in a long time." "You have a gift with children," Margaret smiled, watching Emma arrange her peas in a small circle around her plate. "Children just need to feel heard," she said softly. "They have so much to say, but adults are often too busy to listen." David nodded, understanding the gentle correction in her words. "I've been so focused on building a future for her that I think I've been missing her present." "It's never too late to change that," Margaret said. "She adores you." "That's clear. She just wants more of your time." As the evening wound down, David found himself reluctant to see it end. There was something about Margaret's calm presence that had brought out the best in both him and Emma. He made a decision that surprised even him. "Margaret," he said, as they stood outside the restaurant, "I know this might sound presumptuous, but would you consider, that is, Emma seems to have formed quite an attachment to you, and I wonder if you might be interested in spending time with us occasionally. Not as hired help," he added quickly, "but as family." Margaret looked at Emma, who was nodding eagerly while clutching Mr. Whiskers. She thought about her small, quiet apartment and the evenings she spent alone with her books and her memories. She thought about this little girl who needed someone to truly listen, and this father who was learning to see what really mattered. "I think I'd like that very much," she said softly. And as they parted ways that night, Emma with a promise to call Margaret the next day, David with a new understanding of what his daughter needed, and Margaret with the unexpected gift of belonging. The park lights continued to twinkle overhead, silent witnesses to the kind of magic that happens when kindness finds its way home. In the weeks that followed, their unlikely friendship deepened. Margaret became a regular dinner guest, a companion on weekend adventures, and the grandmother figure Emma had never known she needed. David learned to leave his phone in another room and discovered that his daughter was funnier, smarter, and more interesting than he had ever realized. For Margaret, it was a second chance at family. Not the traditional kind she had once dreamed of, but something even more precious for being freely chosen. Sometimes the most beautiful gifts come wrapped in the simplest moments. A scared child on a park bench, a stranger's kindness, and the courage to let love grow in unexpected places.